If you've ever said, I want to like tofu, I just don't know what to do with it, then this video is for you. Over the past few years, I've made over 100 tofu recipes. Crispy, baked, scrambled, frozen, marinated, shredded, blended into sauces. I've put this humble blog through everything. Some recipes were life-changing, some were deeply disappointing, and others absolutely not worth your time. So today I'm saving you the trial and error. These are the tofu recipes that I genuinely come back to. The ones that are weeknight easy, flavor-packed, and actually satisfying. Whether you're fully plant-based or just tofu curious, I promise there's at least one here that will convert you. If you do like this video, please give it a thumbs up as it really helps to support my channel, and consider subscribing if you found this useful. Okay, grab a cup of tea and let's get into it. First up, we have a very simple crispy soy garlic tofu by Christy at home. The reason why this recipe is on my list is because 1, it's really easy, 2, it's packed with flavor, and 3, it kind of feels like a takeaway or something special but at quite low an effort. For this recipe, we have a crispy pan-fried tofu in a garlicky, savory, and umami sauce. It took me probably less than 30 minutes to make, and it probably would have taken me even less if I wasn't filming it. I wanted to get my tofu extra crispy, so I used quite a bit of oil, but you can always bake them in the oven if you want to have a slightly healthier option. But honestly, you can just shallow fry them as well. For this recipe, I use super firm tofu. This tofu doesn't require any pressing, and it's very high in protein. I particularly like this one for making really crispy tofu. A lot of people will freeze their tofu because that changes the structure of the tofu to make it even crispier, but sometimes with the extra firm, especially when you coat it in cornstarch, which is a very typical ingredient that people will use to make crispy tofu, you don't really need to freeze it if you don't want to. After you fry the tofu, you take it out and you put the sauce in, you cook the sauce down a little bit, and the cornstarch in there really thickens it up. Then you'll add your tofu back in and coat everything nicely. And that's pretty much it. It comes together so quickly. Next up, we have sweet and crunchy tofu by Manchi. I'd be really surprised if you hadn't come across her YouTube channel before, because she does make quite a lot of plant-based recipes. And she also has millions of followers. This recipe is high on my list because it's incredibly simple, even more simple than the previous one. This recipe comes together in just a few steps. We'll fry the tofu and get it really nice and crispy. Then we'll mix together the sauce, fry the sauce just to make sure it comes together really nice and thick. And then you'll add the tofu back in, mix everything together, and that is basically it. It comes together so quickly. It's definitely one of those recipes that makes you again feel like you're having a takeaway. And it's just one of those recipes that if you want something a bit more special on a Friday or Saturday night where you just kind of want those flavors, that sweet and spicy, then this is such a good one to go for, especially if you are feeling like you can't be bothered to make something extravagant. This dish is also very vibrant, so I feel like it gives your eyes that wow factor just before you eat it as well. If you like sweet and spicy and sweet and sour things, you 100% have to make this. This is very quick. If you're kind of feeling a little bit like you want to have a kind of takeaway, I think that this would be a really good alternative if you want to just save a little bit of money or make something at home, because this definitely gives the vibe of a takeaway. The flavor is really good, the tofu is really crunchy, and this was really, really easy and straightforward to make. Okay, next up we have crispy tofu katsu by Sarah's Vegan Kitchen. I'm a big fan of Sarah's recipes, but this one, I just could not believe how crunchy this tofu was. It has a perfectly light and crisp panko breading, and it comes together pretty easily. Just like in Sarah's recipe, I paired mine with some white rice and a Japanese curry, although you can put it together with so many other things. But this just feels like a really delicious and classic combination. I won't lie, when I'm breading the tofu, I do find it quite annoying that I get stuff stuck on my fingers, but this could be easily remedied by simply using some tongs or some chopstick to move your tofu through the flour and the wet and then onto the panko breadcrumbs. It really doesn't take very long to fry, and you don't have to put as much oil as I did. You can shallow fry them, I think, as Sarah does, or you can fry them like I have and just takes a little bit less time because you don't have to turn them over. Once these were ready, I just paired it with my rice and my Japanese curry. And I was only supposed to have one, but it was so crunchy and so good that I ended up having 2. Oh, and by the way, there's a Google Doc in the description which has all the details for every single one of these recipes, all the links, etc., all in one place. I love tofu, and I love tofu in all its different forms. I like it because it tastes good, but it's also really high in protein, and I have some big fitness goals this year where it comes to lifting weights and to climbing. One thing I do supplement with though is creatine, so I just want to take a moment to say thank you to Momentous for sponsoring this portion of today's video. If you're lifting weights at all or interested in building muscle, creatine is one of the most widely researched supplements that can really help aid in muscle recovery and muscle growth. And there has been new leading research that talks about why creatine is so important, especially for women. Bone density is something I consider as I'm getting older, and weightlifting really helps with that. So if I can take a supplement like creatine, which I have been doing for about 5 years now, if that's going to help with my muscle growth, that is going to help with my bone density. One of the things I really like about Momentous is that they use rigorous testing, and they're also third-party certified, which is really important for supplements. They have a transparent, minimal formulation with no fillers and no artificial sweeteners. And I particularly like the chews because they are very convenient, where you can take them anytime and anywhere. Especially if you're lazy like me, it makes it so much easier to get your 5 grams of creatine in a day. If you're interested in learning more about Momentous and you have some goals this year, then you could use my code IMI to get 35% off Momentous products. Check out the link in the description below. Next we have a Mapo tofu recipe that I found by Lionel Zeng. This recipe is so good, and I really do believe that it comes together very quickly. There are a few different steps that you have to take, but honestly, every single one of them is 100% worth it. This recipe really brings together some incredible flavors. The Sichuan peppercorns that we lightly toast first and put on at the end make a huge difference. And those oyster mushrooms that we kind of replace the meat with in this version. It really adds a deep umami flavor as well as some really delicious texture. I'm always surprised when I come across a new recipe I haven't tried before that is just out of this world. And this really feels like one of those recipes. Now this recipe uses soft tofu, which is a little bit more sturdy than a silken tofu, but it still requires a lot of delicacy and some care to make sure it doesn't fall apart. You'll see across quite a few of these recipes that the creators will boil their tofu. Not only does this draw more water out, but it allows some of the salt to go in and actually give it a little bit of a seasoning. For this recipe, it really helps the tofu to kind of stay a bit more sturdy, so it's not going to break down when we put it into the sauce and give it a good mix. The positive things I have to say about this recipe are endless, so just go and give it a try. Just as with a lot of the other recipes, they use cornstarch in this to thicken up sauces and to make the tofu crispy. In this instance, the creator uses a cornstarch slurry. You mix it with water first so that you don't get in any lumps, and then you add it to your sauce once you're ready for it to thicken. You'd be surprised at just how quickly a sauce thickens when you use cornstarch if you haven't used it before, and that's what creates that really delicious, thick sauce. The smell of the peppercorns in this is just unbelievable. Dry roasting them and then grinding them up just gives the most incredible just aroma. Time for the official taste test. Honestly, this recipe is so delicious. I really highly recommend giving this a go. It was not that much work. There are a few different steps, but they all make sense and they are all absolutely worth doing. And this will always be a recipe that will be on repeat for me. I only discovered this recently, but it quickly became a fan favorite of mine. So highly recommend giving this a shot. This creator is a genius, honestly. For many of you, silken tofu is just not something that you like, but if you're looking for something that is cold and refreshing, especially on a hot summer's day, this recipe by Kylie Sakida on TikTok is so quick, easy, and really delicious. I think Kylie is a dietitian and her TikTok is Nutrition by Kylie, but again, all the information will be in the description below. This dish is made up of some very classic flavors. I couldn't find the exact measurements for this recipe, so I just kind of guesstimated what she was using. But it's very simple, especially if you like silken tofu. And I just put it on top of some warm rice with some fresh cucumber on top. But if this recipe is not tempting you to try silken tofu, then maybe the next one will. I personally am someone that always relies on having a few meals up my sleeve that take less than 5 minutes to put together, so I also like to freeze some rice that I have made in the Instant Pot with some beans and lentils, and that's what I will use after I've steamed it underneath my tofu. I only have good things to say about silken tofu, but I know texturally it can be quite challenging for some people. However, the next one is actually a chocolate mousse made from silken tofu by Sarah's Vegan Kitchen. And I know what you're thinking, does this mousse taste of silken tofu? No, it actually doesn't. It has only a few ingredients. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any instant coffee, but I'm sure that this would add a lot of delicious flavor. And you basically just put everything in a blender. I don't have a microwave, so I double boiled the chocolate that I then put in. But once you set it overnight, that chocolate really transforms the consistency of the mousse and it feels incredibly silky and smooth, and you cannot taste the tofu whatsoever. The tofu is just a really nice addition to make it silky without having to use dairy. And it does add a bit of more protein if that's something that you're interested in. The next recipe is salt and pepper tofu by Made with Lao. This used to be one of my absolute favorite things that I would always order from a Chinese takeaway any single time I got it. There's a special place I always go when I go back to visit my parents, and salt and pepper tofu is one of those things that's always high on my list, and I never ever forget to get it. So, needless to say, I have been on the lookout for a good salt and pepper tofu, and I think I have finally found it. This recipe is so quick. I know a lot of people do not have a lot of time, so I did want to choose some recipes, or the majority of these recipes, to be recipes that would be easy and quick to make. And also some of these recipes do have a few ingredients that might be slightly harder to find, but you should be able to find absolutely everything that you need for this recipe. The original recipe uses egg, but I don't eat eggs, so I just use an egg replacer. But apart from that, all of the ingredients are very straightforward. There's also a corresponding YouTube video for most of these recipes as well, so you can see exactly how it's supposed to be made and then make it yourself. On the other end of the spectrum is Rainbow Plant Life's Tofu Tikka Masala. Now, this recipe is labor intensive. I like to split it up over 2 different things, so I'll do the marinating of the tofu in the morning, leave that for 8 or so hours, and then I'll do the masala in the evening. But regardless of how much effort this recipe takes, it is always 100% worth it. I've probably made this recipe at least 25, maybe even 30 times at this point. I will always go on about how much I love Nisha's recipes, and actually the recipe after this is also one of hers as well. I am still experimenting far and wide with lots of tofu recipes, but there is a reason why I always come back to her recipes, and particularly her tofu curries. Because the way that she puts them together, the marinating time, using of whole spices and toasting, she has taught me so much, not just about spices, but also tofu and how to prepare tofu to get the kind of texture that you like. Anyway, you 100% need to give this recipe a try, especially if you like curry. One of the ways she makes the tofu so delicious is by broiling it in the oven before adding it to the masala later. This chars it a little bit and adds some extra flavor, and the marinating also gives it a really deep depth of flavor too. Next we have a Chinese-inspired braised tofu, also by Nisha Vora. The Chinese 5-spice in this makes it really delicious and flavorful. And honestly, she just cuts her tofu a little bit differently and fries it so it's thin, and then she adds in some really nice bell peppers and some other aromatics that make the dish really delicious. There are quite a lot of recipes in this whole video that are similar but slightly different. They include some different vegetables or different flavors, different aromatics, or simply just a different way to prepare your tofu. Either way, there are still so many recipes out there that are incredible, and I will definitely have to do a part 2 because I feel like I've only just scratched the surface with some of the best tofu recipes that I have ever tried. If you have any tofu recipes that you think should have been on this list, then I'm going to do a part 2. So let me know in the comments any recipes that you want me to try that either you think is the best or you want to try but you'd rather someone else try it for you first. Let me know what they are. I've realized that there are quite a few actually that I've missed off, which is why I want to make that part 2. So if you did like this video, please give it a thumbs up as it really helps support my channel, and feel free to subscribe if you do not want to miss the next part. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one. Okay.